In the chilling world of true crime, nothing is more haunting than the moment a serial killer faces their fate. The courtroom becomes a theater of raw emotion, gasps from the audience, tears from victims' families, and the killers themselves, sometimes defiant, sometimes broken. From eerie smirks to unrestrained outbursts, their reactions reveal the darkest depths of human psychology. What drives their anger, their indifference, or even their relief? These moments provide a rare, unsettling glimpse into the minds of those who commit the unthinkable. Stay tuned as we unravel the shocking courtroom reactions of some of history's most infamous killers.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey! Jeffrey! I hate you! Mother-
It is over now. This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom.
I'll see you in Disneyland.
Wuornos, America's first high-profile female serial killer, sat at the defense table, her face a storm of defiance and exhaustion. Her trial became a media circus, and she was well aware of the cameras capturing her every move. Wuornos was accused of killing 7 men between 1989 and 1990.
I have made peace with my Lord, and I have asked forgiveness. I am sorry that my acts of self-defense ended up in court like this, but I take full responsibility for my actions. It was them or me. I am sorry for all the pain that my actions have caused. I am prepared to die if you say it is necessary.
She claimed the murders were acts of self-defense, saying the men had assaulted or attempted to assault her while she worked as a sex worker. But the evidence told a different story, painting her as a cold-blooded killer who lured her victims, robbed them, and then shot them in cold blood. For many, Wuornos wasn't just a criminal. She was an enigma, a woman hardened by years of abuse, homelessness, and survival on society's margins. She embodied a tragic mix of victimhood and violence. From the beginning, Wuornos didn't make things easy for her defense team. She frequently lashed out at her attorneys, the prosecution, and even the judge. Her volatile nature made headlines, and it became clear that Wuornos wasn't interested in playing the part of the remorseful defendant. Throughout the trial, she maintained her story that the killings were acts of self-defense. Yet, as the evidence mounted against her, it became harder for her to sustain that narrative. Ballistic evidence, stolen items traced back to her, and her own taped confessions paint a damning picture. Even so, there were moments when Wuornos seemed to break through her hardened exterior.
But what about the testimony that you gave in court about?
Oh, that's just the way, like I was saying.
About the Visine and...
Oh, I was just doing lying biz. That was just my lying gig, trying to beat the system.
In one instance, she tearfully recounted the abuse she had endured throughout her life. From her childhood to her years on the streets, I was raped and beaten my whole life, she said.
But nonetheless,
nobody ever asked me these questions.
Whether the cops were following you or not, Eileen.
Oh, whether the cops were following me or not, Eileen,
okay,
what?
Let's say the cops were following you.
Yeah.
Let's say they were following you and they did everything that you're saying they did.
What do you expect from someone like me? But just as quickly as the vulnerability appeared, it would vanish, replaced by anger and bitterness. When the day of sentencing arrived, the courtroom was packed. Families of the victims sat in the gallery, clutching tissues and photographs of their loved ones. Wuornos entered the room in a plain blouse and slacks, her hair pulled back. She looked weary but defiant, as though she was ready to face whatever was coming. The judge began by recounting the brutal details of her crimes, describing how she had lured her victims, shot them at close range, and discarded their bodies like trash. As he spoke, Wuornos sat stone-faced, her hands folded in her lap. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for.
To death for the murder of Troy Burris, case number 91-304. I sentence you to death for the murder of Charles Humphreys. Case number 91-112, Citrus County case number. I sentence you to death for the murder of David Spears.
The judge announced her sentence, death. He condemned her to die by lethal injection, a punishment reserved for the worst of the worst. What happened next stunned the courtroom.
I know I was raped. You weren't nothing but a bunch of stuff.
Therefore, these proceedings are now
putting
concluded.
somebody who was raped to death.
Wuornos, who had been silent up to this point, suddenly erupted. She screamed at the judge, her voice filled with fury. "I'm innocent. I was raped. You're killing a raped woman." The room fell into a shocked silence as she continued, her words becoming more unhinged. Finally, she delivered a chilling curse to the judge. "I hope you get raped in the..." The courtroom was frozen. Even the most seasoned reporters and lawyers were taken aback by her raw, unfiltered rage. Her outburst made headlines the next day, with many calling it the defining moment of her trial. It wasn't just her words that shocked people, it was what they revealed about her. Wuornos was a woman consumed by anger, unable to accept her fate or take responsibility for her actions. For the families of her victims, her reaction was a slap in the face. They had hoped for remorse, for some acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. Instead, they were met with defiance and rage. In the years that followed, Wuornos' behavior remained erratic. She gave several interviews from death row, during which she alternated between claiming self-defense and admitting to the murders. In one chilling moment, she said,
"It sounds like you've been betrayed by everyone."
That's right, I was. That's why I don't care if I'm executed and leave this planet.
"I was tired of being used and abused. I wanted to get back at the world." Her execution took place on October 9, 2002.
"Aren't you afraid?"
No, I'm not afraid. I know where I'm going. I'm going to be with the Lord.
By that time, she had stopped appealing her sentence, saying she was ready to die. Aileen Wuornos' explosive outburst during her sentencing shocked the courtroom. Her fiery rage a stark contrast to the eerie calm of Jeffrey Dahmer. Unlike Wuornos, who lashed out at everyone around her, Dahmer sat quietly, showing little emotion even as his heinous crimes were laid bare. Yet, beneath his stoic exterior, there were hints of remorse, or perhaps manipulation. Moving to the sentencing of the Milwaukee Cannibal, and how his courtroom demeanor left both victims' families and the public unnerved. The courtroom was packed. The air was thick with a mix of grief, rage, and a strange sense of morbid curiosity. Everyone present knew they were witnessing the final chapter in the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, the man who shocked the world with his horrific crimes. For the families of his victims, this wasn't just a trial. It was a desperate search for closure, for answers that might never truly come. Dahmer, dubbed the Milwaukee Cannibal, sat quietly as the court prepared to deliver his sentence. His behavior throughout the trial had been unsettling, to say the least. He wasn't the raging, defiant figure people might have expected from someone capable of such imaginable acts. Instead, Dahmer was oddly calm, even polite, as though he were just another man in the room, not a serial killer responsible for the deaths of 17 young men and boys. Throughout the trial, Dahmer rarely showed any emotion. Some speculated that this stoicism was a defense mechanism, while others believed it was a chilling reflection of his true nature, a man devoid of normal human feelings. He sat expressionless as the gruesome details of his crimes were laid bare. The dismemberment, the necrophilia, the cannibalism. Each testimony brought tears and outrage from the families, but Dahmer remained unmoved, his face a blank canvas. And yet, there were moments where his mask seemed to slip. During his allocution,
Your Honor, it is over now. This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one.
Dahmer addressed the court and the victims' families directly. In a monotone voice, he expressed remorse, saying, "I never wanted freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. I knew I was sick or evil, or both." The words were shocking, almost surreal. Was he truly repentant, or was this another twisted manipulation? When the day of sentencing arrived, the courtroom was tense. Family members clutched photographs of their lost loved ones, tears streaming down their faces. The judge began reading the sentence: 15 consecutive life terms, a total of 957 years behind bars. For the families, it wasn't enough. No punishment could ever balance the scales for what Dahmer had done. As the words left the judge's mouth, all eyes turned to Dahmer. Would he cry? Would he lash out? Instead, he sat still, his expression unreadable. There was no defiance, no tears, no visible sign of relief. Just the same eerie calm he had carried since his arrest. Some speculated that he welcomed the sentence, that prison was a fitting end for a man who once told police he didn't deserve to live. But what lingered in the air was the weight of his final statement, given just days before sentencing.
I feel so bad for what I did to those poor families, and I understand their rightful hate.
I can't undo the terrible harm I've caused, and I want to say to the families, I am sorry. I know that won't give you peace. I know I'll never be forgiven. The courtroom was silent after he spoke, but his words only deepened the mystery of who Jeffrey Dahmer truly was. For the victims' families, Dahmer's subdued reaction to his sentencing was infuriating. They had expected or perhaps hoped for a breakdown, a moment where he would visibly suffer for the horrors he inflicted. Instead, his silence felt like another act of cruelty, a refusal to give them even the smallest semblance of satisfaction. During victim impact statements, the emotional dam finally burst. One of the most memorable moments came from Rita Isbell.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey! Jeffrey, I hate you! Mother, I hate you! Something's out of control! Don't Jeffrey, I kill you, God damn it! Look at me, motherfucker! I can kill you! I can kill you!
The sister of Errol Lindsay, one of Dahmer's victims. She stormed toward him screaming, "You took my brother! I hate you!" Dahmer didn't flinch, his lack of reaction stoking her anger further. After his sentencing, Dahmer's eerie calm continued. He later told reporters that he was relieved to be in prison, away from the temptations that had driven him. But his time behind bars was far from peaceful. He was a marked man, despised even by other inmates for the heinous nature of his crimes. In the end, Dahmer's life would be cut short in prison, beaten to death by a fellow inmate in 1994. For some, it was poetic justice. For others, it was an escape from the lifetime of suffering he deserved. As we transition from Dahmer's eerie silence to Ramirez's unapologetic defiance, we see yet another dark facet of how killers confront their fate. Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, was an infamous American serial killer, rapist, and burglar. Ramirez was the youngest of 5 children born to Mexican immigrants in El Paso. Ramirez's first confirmed murder occurred in June 1984 when he raped and stabbed a 79-year-old widow. Although his killings briefly paused, he resumed his spree in 1985, targeting victims primarily during home invasions in the Los Angeles area. His crimes often involved sexual assault, brutal beatings, and satanic symbols left at the scenes. His indiscriminate targeting of men, women, and children created widespread panic, resulting in a significant surge in gun sales across the region. On August 30th, 1985, his name and photograph were made public. The next day, Ramirez was spotted by a civilian in East Los Angeles, leading to a chase. Attempting to steal a car, Ramirez was caught and beaten by a crowd before police arrived to arrest him. Ramirez waited in jail as his trial was continuously pushed off, the delay marked by a series of motions and bickering between the prosecutors and defense attorney. Because the geographical spread of the crimes also complicated the scope of the trial, with jurisdictional issues. Some of the charges against Ramirez were dropped in order to expedite what was becoming a long journey to justice. The jury selection process finally moved forward on July 22, 1988, and the trial itself commenced the following January. During this time, Ramirez attracted a cult-like following of supporters, many of whom were black-clad Satan worshippers. Ramirez himself often dressed in black, along with his dark shades, for his courtroom appearances. Yet another delay occurred when one juror was found murdered on August 14, 1989. But rumors that Ramirez had orchestrated her death proved unfounded. On September 20, 1989, the jury finally returned with a unanimous guilty verdict on 43 charges, including 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 sexual assault charges, and 14 burglary charges. 2 weeks later, the same jury recommended the death sentence on 19 counts. Leaving the courtroom, Ramirez responded, "Hey, big deal. Death always comes with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland."
I'll see you in Disneyland.
The convicted murderer was formally sentenced to death by the gas chamber on November 7, 1989, and was sent to the San Quentin prison in California to spend the remainder of his days. The presiding judge condemned Ramirez's acts as demonstrating cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond human understanding. Despite the verdict, Ramirez showed no remorse. After his death sentence was announced, he chillingly remarked,
Big deal. Death always went with the territory.
"Big deal. Death always went with the territory." While on death row at San Quentin State Prison, Ramirez was believed to have committed additional crimes for which he was never charged. In 2013, he died of cancer, leaving behind a legacy of fear and infamy as one of America's most terrifying serial killers. The chilling courtroom moments of these infamous killers remind us of the contrast between justice and humanity's darkest depths. Each reaction, defiance, stoicism, or twisted indifference offers a glimpse into their fractured minds, leaving us grappling with questions that may never have answers. Which moment left you shocked the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of true crime stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of our deep dives into the world's most chilling cases. Stay safe and curious.